The spaceship descended quietly through the thick violet clouds of the planet Gliese 667 CF, landing with a soft thud on the damp, moss-covered ground. The hatch slid open, and for the first time, Ethan stepped out into the alien world. A stark contrast from the urban sprawl of Earth he had left behind. Here, everything was oversized. The trees towered like skyscrapers, their leaves a brilliant shade of blue, and even the air buzzed with the hum of strange, unseen creatures. Ethan had been sent to the Gliese orphanage for the alien displaced, a sprawling facility that housed children from countless galaxies whose planets had been ravaged by wars or swallowed by black holes. The orphanage, a collection of dome-shaped buildings connected by transparent tunnels, sat in the heart of a luminescent forest, casting an eerie glow that flickered like a beacon. As Ethan approached the main entrance, a group of children stared at him from one of the transparent tunnels. They were an eclectic mix of species, some with scales, others with fur, and a few that shimmered with a metallic sheen. Their eyes, whether one or three, all fixed on Ethan, who felt his heart sink slightly. He was used to being the new kid. His father's job had seen to that back on Earth. But this was different. He was the only human here, a novelty that could either be his ticket to fitting in or a marker that would forever set him apart. "Human," a voice hissed, jolting Ethan from his thoughts. A boy, taller than Ethan, with skin that looked like cracked lava, stepped forward. His name was Kraz, and he was the unofficial leader of the orphanage's children. His presence commanded attention, and his voice, when he spoke, was both mesmerizing and intimidating. "What's your name?" Kraz asked, his eyes narrowing slightly as he circled Ethan, inspecting him like a new specimen in a zoo. "Ethan," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ethan," Kraz repeated, rolling the name around in his mouth as if tasting it. "Well, Ethan, welcome to Gliese Orphanage. You'll find that we're one big happy family here, as long as you follow the rules." Ethan nodded, uncertain if Kraz was being sarcastic. Before he could ask, a small girl with wings that fluttered nervously on her back came up to him. Her eyes were large and luminous, the color of the deep ocean. "I'm Mira," she said in a voice that was almost musical. "If you need anything, just ask me. Some of us are nicer than Kraz makes it seem." "Thanks, Mira." Ethan smiled, grateful for the friendly face. As he was led through the corridors of the orphanage, Ethan couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The walls were adorned with digital murals that depicted landscapes from 100 different worlds, each more beautiful and alien than the last. The children he passed talked in languages he couldn't understand, their voices a symphony of exotic sounds. That night, as he lay in his small room listening to the strange symphony of alien sounds outside his door, Ethan realized just how alone he felt. The darkness of the room seemed to press in on him, and the distant cries of night creatures on this alien planet made him long for the familiar sounds of Earth. But amidst the shadows and the unfamiliar, a determined spark ignited within him. He resolved that he would not let this new world intimidate him. Instead, he would make it his home, no matter what it took. Unbeknownst to Ethan, the next day would test his resolve in ways he could never have imagined, as the Orphanage Bullies, led by Kraz, planned their own welcome for the new Earth boy. The morning sun of Gliese 667 CF filtered through the thick canopy, casting a kaleidoscope of shadows on the ground as Ethan made his way towards the communal eating area. The whispers that followed him seemed louder today, echoing with curiosity and suspicion from the various groups of alien children. He noticed Kraz leaning against a wall with his usual entourage, their eyes tracking every step Ethan took. Today, the menu was a mishmash of intergalactic cuisines, none of which resembled the foods Ethan was accustomed to back on Earth. He hesitated, staring at the array of strange dishes, until Mira floated beside him, her wings fluttering gently. "Try the Zeltron pudding," she suggested, pointing to a vibrating blue gel. "It's sweet mostly." Ethan nodded and scooped a small amount onto his plate, trying to appear unfazed by its pulsing movements. As he found a seat, he could feel Kraz's gaze burning into his back, the weight of his stare almost palpable. After a few bites of various unfamiliar foods, Ethan felt a sharp poke on his shoulder. He turned to see one of Kraz's friends, a scaly creature named Velk, standing over him. "Kraz wants a word with you," Velk said, his voice a low growl. Ethan stood, following Velk to where Kraz was waiting. The lava-skinned boy regarded Ethan with a smirk. "So, human, how's your first Glesian morning going?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's been interesting," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. Kraz chuckled darkly. Good, but let's see how well you adapt to our ways. We have a tradition here for new arrivals, a sort of initiation." Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. "What kind of initiation?" "It's simple," Kraz said. He pointed to a large open field visible through the transparent walls of the orphanage. "A race. You against Velk. Through the hovering forest." The hovering forest was notorious among the children. It was filled with floating trees that moved without warning, creating a labyrinth that was constantly changing. It was a treacherous place, and navigating it was a challenge even for those who had lived on Glesa 667 CF for years. Ethan swallowed hard, but nodded. "All right, when do we start?" "Now," Kraz declared, and a crowd quickly gathered, buzzing with excitement. As they approached the starting line, Mira flew to Ethan's side. "Be careful," she whispered. "The forest isn't just physically challenging, it's disorienting. Focus on finding the rhythm in the chaos." Ethan nodded, grateful for her advice but anxious about what lay ahead. The race began with a sharp cry from Kraz, and immediately, Velk sprinted forward with surprising speed. Ethan followed, his heart pounding as he dodged the first of the floating trees. The forest seemed alive, aware of his every move. Each step forward met with a new obstacle. He quickly realized that brute force wouldn't win this race. Instead, he tried to anticipate the trees' movements, using their momentum to propel himself forward. It was a dance of sorts, one that required him to be fully in tune with his alien surroundings. Velk was fast, but Ethan's adaptability began to give him an edge. He wove through the trees with increasing confidence, each successful dodge boosting his morale. As the end of the course came into sight, Ethan felt a surge of hope. He might actually win this. Just then, a massive tree swung directly in his path. He rolled under it, barely escaping a crushing blow. Picking himself up, he sprinted the final stretch, crossing the finish line just seconds before Velk. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted in cheers. Ethan, panting and covered in dirt, couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, he had earned their respect today. As he looked around at the cheering faces, he saw even Kraz clapping, a grudging respect in his eyes. Today, Ethan had not only survived the challenge, but had begun to weave himself into the fabric of his new home. As the excitement of the race settled, Ethan found himself surrounded by a mix of curious and approving glances. Kraz, still clapping slowly, approached with a wry smile. "Not bad, human. Not bad at all." Ethan, catching his breath, managed a nod. "Thanks, Kraz." "Maybe you're tougher than you look," Kraz conceded, his tone less hostile now. "We'll see how you handle the next challenge." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "There's more?" "Always," Kraz replied with a mysterious grin, before turning away, leaving Ethan to ponder the implications. The following days at the orphanage brought a subtle shift in the dynamics around Ethan. His victory in the hovering forest had earned him a newfound respect, and more children began to speak to him, sharing stories of their planets and the tragedies that led them to Glesa. Each story added layers to Ethan's understanding of the galaxy's vastness and the conflicts that rumbled through it. During one of these conversations, a shy, tentacled creature named Loru approached Ethan. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Ethan, can I speak with you? In private?" Curious, Ethan followed Loru to a quieter part of the orphanage garden, where luminescent flowers cast gentle light on their path. "I need your help," Loru began, her multiple eyes darting nervously. "It's about Kraz." Ethan tensed, sensing the seriousness of the conversation. "What about him?" "He's planning something dangerous. Not just a challenge or a prank. Something that could get us all in trouble. Maybe worse. Ethan considered this. Kraz was a bully, but he hadn't pegged him for something truly malicious. What do you mean by dangerous? He's found something. An artifact from the old wars. He thinks it can give him power, control over the orphanage and beyond. He's assembling a group trying to figure out how to use it, Loru explained, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. The old wars? Ethan questioned, his interest piqued by the historical reference. Yes, relics from those times are powerful and often dangerous. They belong in the hands of the Galactic Council, not with children, Loru insisted. Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Do you know what this artifact does? Not exactly, but I overheard him talking about unlocking potential. That could mean many things, none of them good. Realizing the potential threat not just to their safety, but to peace in the galaxy, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Okay, Loru. We need to find out more and stop him if it's as bad as you think. We'll need help, though. Loru's tentacles relaxed slightly. I thought you might say that. I know a few others who are worried too. They'll help us. Good. Let's gather them. We need a plan, Ethan said, his mind already racing with possibilities. Together they rounded up a small group of allies from among the orphanage's residents. Each one brought a unique set of skills and insights, from hacking and espionage to knowledge of ancient galactic history. As they met in secret, pooling their resources and information, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie that he hadn't expected to find in this strange new world. The group decided their first step was to discover more about the artifact's capabilities and Kraz's plans. With a mix of trepidation and determination, they set out to infiltrate Kraz's quarters, a risky move that would propel them deeper into a web of galactic intrigue than any of them had anticipated. Under the cloak of night, the small band of conspirators made their way to the sleeping quarters where Kraz and his closest followers resided. Ethan led the group, his heart pounding not just from the stealthy trek, but from the weight of what they were about to undertake. Loru, with her ability to manipulate her form, slithered ahead, scouting for any signs of movement. The hallways of the orphanage were dimly lit by the bioluminescent algae that streaked the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced as they passed. Clear, Loru hissed softly, signaling them to proceed. At the entrance to Kraz's room, Ethan turned to Mira. Can you handle the door? Nodding, Mira extended her delicate wing-like appendages towards the lock. A soft, almost inaudible click echoed as the mechanism disengaged, thanks to her precise manipulation of the internal circuitry. The door slid open silently, revealing a room that was a stark contrast to the rest of the orphanage. It was filled with artifacts and technology, much of it likely scavenged from around the galaxy. The center of the room was dominated by a large metallic box, presumably where Kraz kept the artifact. Quickly, find the artifact and anything related to it, Ethan whispered, as everyone spread out, their eyes scanning for the crucial piece. Velk, the group's tech expert, approached the box, his fingers dancing over its surface, feeling for the release mechanism. With a soft thud, the box opened, revealing a small crystalline device, pulsing with a faint internal light. This must be it, Velk murmured, holding up the artifact for the others to see. Just then, a noise from the corridor snapped their attention to the doorway. Someone's coming, Loru whispered urgently. Put it back quick, Ethan said. As Velk replaced the artifact, they all hid behind various pieces of furniture and equipment. The door slid open and Kraz stepped in, flanked by two of his cronies. They were deep in conversation, oblivious to the intruders hiding mere feet away. We need to test it tomorrow. If it works, we'll have more power than any of us ever dreamed, Kraz was saying, his voice filled with greed and excitement. His followers nodded, their faces a mix of excitement and fear. And if it doesn't? One dared to ask. Kraz's expression darkened. It will. It must. As they left, closing the door behind them, Ethan and his team emerged from their hiding spots, each one of them more determined but also more frightened than before. They're testing the artifact tomorrow, Ethan repeated what he had overheard. "We don't have much time." "We need to act tonight," Mira insisted. "Whatever that thing does, we can't let them complete their test." The group agreed, and they quickly devised a plan to sabotage the experiment. Using a combination of Loru's ability to mimic appearances and Velk's technological expertise, they prepared to intercept the artifact and replace it with a harmless duplicate that Velk rapidly assembled from spare parts. Hours later, as the first hints of dawn began to light the sky, Ethan and his team were back in their own beds, the replica in place, their hearts still racing from the night's escapades. They had done everything they could. Now, all they could do was wait and see if their efforts would be enough to thwart Kraz's dangerous ambitions. The morning buzz of the orphanage was tinged with a palpable tension as the day of the test arrived. Ethan and his covert team exchanged nervous glances during breakfast, their usual morning chatter replaced by a silent agreement of the stakes at hand. Everyone knew that today would either solidify their efforts to protect the orphanage or expose them to unforeseen dangers. In the secluded field where Kraz had decided to conduct the experiment, the children gathered, drawn by the promise of witnessing something extraordinary. The artifact, now swapped with Velk's harmless replica, lay at the center of a makeshift arena, rigged with various devices and screens that Kraz and his followers had set up overnight. Kraz stepped forward with a swagger, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of triumph. "Today we change our destinies," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. He approached the device, activating it with a dramatic flourish. Ethan watched intently, his stomach tight with anxiety. The device began to hum, the lights on its surface blinking erratically as it powered up. Kraz's confident smile faltered as the seconds stretched on, the artifact continuing to buzz harmlessly. "It's supposed to do more," Kraz barked, his voice edging into desperation as he fiddled with the controls. From their vantage point, Ethan and his team felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Their plan had worked, but the fallout was unpredictable. Kraz was not someone to take failure lightly, and his disappointment could easily turn into suspicion and wrath. As Kraz's frustration boiled over, the crowd began to murmur, their whispers growing into a cacophony of doubt and confusion. Sensing the shift in mood, Kraz spun around, his gaze sweeping over the assembled children. "This isn't over," he snapped, his threat hanging in the air as he stormed off, flanked by his bewildered cronies. The failure of the artifact sowed seeds of doubt among Kraz's followers, some of whom began to distance themselves from him, wary of associating with his failed leadership. This shift presented an opportunity for Ethan and his team to strengthen their bonds with the other children, fostering a sense of unity and safety that had been missing under Kraz's rule. However, the relief was tempered by the knowledge that Kraz would be searching for the reason behind the artifact's malfunction. The risk of their tampering being discovered loomed large, threatening to unravel their fragile peace. That evening, as the orphanage settled into an uneasy quiet, Ethan met with his team to discuss their next moves. "We need to be ready," he said, his voice low. "Kraz isn't going to let this go. We need to watch our backs and stay one step ahead." They agreed to keep a low profile and prepare for any repercussions, understanding that while they had won a battle, the war was far from over. Their actions had changed the dynamic at the orphanage, but each step forward would need to be measured and cautious. In the shadows of the coming night, Ethan felt the weight of leadership resting on his shoulders, knowing that each decision now carried the potential for significant consequences. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a resilient hope began to blossom, fueled by the camaraderie and shared purpose that had united them against a common threat. As the new day dawned on Gliza 667 CF, Ethan awoke with a sense of purpose. The morning was unusually quiet, the usual cacophony of alien birds and the whispering winds through the towering flora muted, as if the very atmosphere of the orphanage was holding its breath. The reprieve from Kraz's immediate retaliation had given Ethan and his team a momentary peace, but they all knew it wouldn't last. By mid-morning, the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted. Kraz, having spent the night piecing together the failure of his demonstration, confronted Ethan in the main courtyard, his usual entourage noticeably thinned. His eyes were wild with fury and accusation. "You did something to the artifact," Kraz hissed, cornering Ethan against the cold metal wall of the nearest building. The remaining orphans circled around, an audience to the showdown. Ethan held his ground, meeting Kraz's gaze with a calm he didn't fully feel. "Kraz, you were trying to use something you didn't understand. It could have hurt everyone here." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, bolstering Ethan's confidence. The children of the orphanage, once passive onlookers, now seemed to awaken to the gravity of Kraz's ambitions. Kraz scoffed, attempting to regain his threatening posture. "And you just decided to play hero? What makes you think you can dictate what's right for us?" "Because I care about what happens to us," Ethan retorted, his voice growing stronger, "not just about gaining power." His words struck a chord with many in the crowd, their nods and murmurs of agreement growing louder. Kraz looked around, his stance faltering as he saw the faces of his peers, no longer the faces of followers, but of critics. In a last-ditch effort to salvage his control, Kraz lunged at Ethan, but two of his former allies stepped forward, holding him back. "Enough, Kraz," one of them said, her voice steady. "It's over. We're tired of fighting and fearing what you might do next." Defeated and outnumbered, Kraz relented, his shoulders slumping as the realization of his isolation sank in. The crowd dispersed, leaving him standing alone, a stark figure diminished by his own hubris. In the aftermath, the orphanage began to change. Without Kraz's domineering presence, the children started collaborating, using their diverse abilities and knowledge to improve life for everyone. Ethan found himself in a de facto leadership role, one he accepted with a solemn dedication to make the orphanage a true sanctuary. Weeks turned into months, and the orphanage flourished. Gardens were cultivated with plants from various worlds, technology was shared and improved, and a new curriculum that included learning about each species' culture and history was developed. The orphanage no longer felt like a detention center for the lost. It became a vibrant community, a melting pot of galactic cultures coexisting in harmony. One evening, as Ethan looked out over the thriving community, Mira joined him, her wings reflecting the light of Gliza's twin suns. "You changed this place, Ethan," she said softly. "It wasn't just me," Ethan replied, his gaze sweeping over the happy, bustling crowd. "It took all of us. We needed to remember we're not just survivors or orphans. We're a family, and we protect each other." Mira smiled, a sentiment shared in her luminous eyes. "Yes, a family, and it's stronger than ever now." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the orphanage, Ethan felt a profound sense of accomplishment and belonging. The challenges they faced had brought them together, forging bonds stronger than the fears that had once threatened to divide them. In this new unity, they found not just survival, but a way to thrive.